Hello family, BL Carter here, hoping that you're doing well and working on your puzzle one piece at a time. This particular cast is going to talk about what we see here. Two mounted Galveston police officers walking a handcuffed and leashed man down the street. Now this man, Mr. Donald Neely, was arrested. He was arrested for trespassing, and they made note that he was suspiciously wearing a welder's hat, which you can see this officer right here holding in his hand. The two officers, Mr. Broche and Mr. Smith, were they're mounties, they're mounted officers, and so they patrol the Galveston area, and somehow they came into contact with him, arrested him for trespassing. Apparently, Mr. Neely has a history of mental health, mental retardation, as well as he's a homeless man. The concerns, well, he was also being taken to the staging location, kind of where they stage their horses, feed up, give them water, that sort of thing, before they make their rounds in their area. So that's where he was being taken to at the time. I've got a couple questions about this. Now, this happened in Galveston, Texas, Galveston County. I'm not sure exactly the city, but Galveston County, Texas, last week or a few days ago. And so here are my concerns, and I'll just put them out there for you guys. My first concern, are there not cars to call in for pickup? Is there not a transport unit? Well, the police chief, in a press release, a written press release, announced that there were transport units. He further announced that the officers, this particular method of transport is one of the manners in which the officers are trained, but not necessarily for this particular scenario. He further went on to say that this particular circumstance did not warrant them transporting him in this manner, and that they should have waited for a transport vehicle. Now, my second concern with this, they're parading him through the streets, and just so many things jumped out at me. This symbolizes humiliation, a dehumanization, as if he's a dog. I mean, he's already handcuffed. He's not going to outrun the horses. Horses are small enough they can navigate alleyways and things like that. So it's not like he's on foot and he can take off running into an alley and they're in a car and they can't get in there. They can follow behind on the horse if need be. So the need to tie him up, to tie a rope to the handcuff and lead him on a leash, basically just like a dog, is unacceptable. It's humiliating. It's dehumanizing. It's well, I guess it kind of falls in line with the 3/5 human person, the Dred Scott decision. All those laws, case laws that were passed all of years ago, and we've never really dealt with. The other thing that just jumped out at me, I saw a slave catcher, or two slave catchers. I saw slave catchers who had caught a runaway slave, and the slave is being led back in shackles. Shackles are tied to a leash of sorts, whether it's metal chains or rope or whatever, but he's still tied to some sort of leash. The slave catchers are surrounding him so he can't get away, and they're riding their packs of horses as the slave is walking. Now, of course, that's not exactly what's going on here, because this man is not officially a slave and they're not officially slave catchers, but it is a black man. And these are two white officers, and they are on horses, and we know the history of the police having derived from a slave patrol way back when. So that connection is easy to be made. It's an image that any black person who knows anything about history could almost never get out of their heads. Um, but here's the other thing. They didn't walk him up and down the sidewalk or on the side of the street, in case the horse poop or something you don't want in the sidewalk, it's in the street. So they didn't walk him on the side of the street, maybe next to the cars or whatever. They walked him down the middle of the street. Um, as you can see in this right picture, it looks like they're crossing over. They didn't cross at the intersection, they crossed in the middle of the street. Um, and so again, what that does is that parades him through everyone else. Just like in the days of the slave catchers, they would catch the slave and they parade him through so all the other slaves could see, hey, don't do this again. We got you. We got him. Be afraid. We're going to punish him. And if you try, this is what's going to happen to you. Well, this is a homeless man. So I'm sure his homeless comrades are somewhere lying around, lurking around, watching and seeing what's going on. And I'm sure it sends a very similar message to them. Hey, don't be homeless, or don't get caught being homeless. Don't get caught covering your head, because if you do, we're going to arrest you. And or don't get caught trespassing, sleeping, or hanging out in some area you're not supposed to be. Because if so, we're going to arrest you. We're going to handcuff you. We're going to tie you up, and we're going to parade you through the street as well. Um, And since Texas was one of the last states to release its slaves from slavery, that's why we have Juneteenth, because they got the message late. It's not surprising. It's I mean, that was my first thought when I looked at it. I saw slave patrol, slave being the runaway slave caught and being brought back. Now, in all fairness, I don't know the officers personally. I can't say for sure why they chose this method. But I will say I'm in agreement with the police chief and the rest of the people that are in uproar in the Galveston area. This is unacceptable. Here was my other question. How many other people are transported in this manner? If many are transported in this manner, then it needs to stop, period. But I'm going to get to that in a second. But obviously, it's not. And I say that because if it were routine, then nobody would be upset about it. You wouldn't have the outrage that's going on. So this is not routine. Though they may have been trained to do it, it's not routine, which says they know the difference. They were trained in other methods, but they chose to use this one. But if it is routine, like I said, nobody would be upset. It would just be, normal way. They got another one. They arrested somebody else and just going about their business. That's not what's going on in Galveston. People are upset down there. Now, there was a town hall meeting tonight. Apparently, the council, the police chief, and all the appropriate dignitaries are supposed, as well as the community stakeholders, are supposed to be on hand to discuss, the issue and whatever else needs to come out of it. I will say this: the police chief specified in his press release that policy had already been changed. It had already been made a change to the policy to immediately stop this practice. So they're not supposed to transport detainees or persons being arrested in this manner going forward. They're supposed to wait for a transport vehicle. Um, Two things. One other thing. Let me add here. I appreciate the police chief for immediately making those determinations. But the officers, there's been no reprimand, discipline, sanction in any kind of way at all. Um, and I think there should be. Not necessarily termination. I don't know, because I don't know the officers personally. I don't know their personnel files, any history. So I wouldn't go so far as to say termination. If there's something in the history that may warrant this sort of behavior, or behavior that indicates racism or racist behavior, then you might look at a termination. I'm not even sure I would say an extended suspension or anything, but at the very minimum, a stern reprimand, um, but possibly a day or two suspension. It was very If it was just completely honest mistake or bad decision, then let them sit at home for 2 or 3 days without pay. so that they would learn, hey, don't do this, and the other officers learn, don't do this. Um, if his file does not show that, it's clear, then, go that route. If there's some history there, then, you may look at something stronger. But bottom line is completely unacceptable. We are at a point where racism, displays of racist behavior is, I won't say at an all-time high, but in my lifetime it's at an all-time high. It's rampant left and right, thanks to all the political figures who are helping to take the lid off of it. It's becoming very volatile. People are angry. People are getting upset. People are tired of being treated subhuman, less than human. If they can live, if they can work, and I don't know if he works or not. I don't know if he, what his details are. But if they can live, if they can try to work, if they can try to be whatever best citizen they can be, or a citizen at all, period, then we have to start treating them as such. I understand that, 3/5 a human. According to Dred Scott, he's a black man. He can never be a human. I'm sorry, he can never be, full human. He's going to always be a slave, etc., etc. Um, but that's not that's what's still on the books, case law. But that's not how we operate. That is not how we operate. So that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And I do hope, and I believe his sister is advocating for him and has an attorney, etc., etc. I do hope that stiff measures are taken um, to resolve this, to address the officers in their choice. Again, this is not routine. They don't do it all the time. Um, and I would venture to say the other officers don't do it all the time because, again, it's not routine. So get to the bottom of why they chose this method on this particular occasion. Get to the bottom of their personnel files and see if there's any other history in there that may indicate that they were, treating him less than they should have treated him. That being the case, you guys just think about it. Let me know your comments. And just be mindful, be aware. Do whatever you can to stay out of these situations. We can't always prevent homelessness, but if you have to be homeless, just be mindful about where you're snuggling down for the night. Um, do whatever you can, even if you have a mental health history. If you can seek your mental health care, um, do whatever you can to try to stay away from these situations, because we find ourselves in these, and oftentimes we don't get to wake up and tell our story. And I must say thank you, both Officer Broche and Smith, because this man is able to walk into the into the car or police precinct, wherever y'all are walking him to. Other men don't get a chance to do that. So I thank you for that. And I think that's also definitely something that should be taken into consideration when they're dealing with this matter. The fact that the man does not appear to be beaten, and I don't know, the picture is not very, very clear, but he doesn't appear to be beaten and bloody and that sort of thing. So, I guess to some degree that will work in the officer's favor. So let me know what you think. Take care, and we'll catch you in the next one.